Folks, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here this morning. Just the fact that you've all chosen to take some of a beautiful fall Sunday morning and spend some time with us thinking about what's going on in Israel and around the world today shows, the seriousness, the gravity of everything that's happening and how seriously as Jews we're taking all of these events and how we're struggling with it as Jews as well. It's what we're hearing from all of our congregants and all the conversations that we're having. So really just appreciate you taking the time to be here, and we expect a conversation that should, I think, be helpful, informative, and I hope in some ways comforting as well. It's always to me just comforting to be together in community, which is part of what this is about too. So I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Saroken, who will introduce our panelists, and we'll get going.
So good morning to everyone. I want to reiterate what Rabbi Schwartz said and just say thank you for being here and thank you for caring. We wanted to have this conversation because in many ways we've all been following what's happening on different campuses. I think there's a sense of shock, there's a sense of disbelief, there's a sense of fear and concern. And I also think there's a sense of helplessness that we're trying to figure out how do we use our voices to help support Jewish college students across the country in America, and also how do we use our voices to help be agents of change in a system that seems to not be working very well to keep Jewish students safe or feeling safe on our campuses today. So you're going to notice that today we have three panelists that are here with us, and I'm so grateful that these are our three panelists today. When we were thinking about creating a panel like this, these were the three people that came to mind, and they all said yes, which feels like a small miracle. So many of you probably know Howard Libit. Can everyone see from wherever you are right now? Howard, can you stand up for just a minute? Howard is the executive director of our Baltimore Jewish Council. Before that, he was a director of strategic planning and policy for Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake. Before that, he spent 15 years as a reporter and an editor at the Baltimore Sun. He worked on pieces, including pieces regarding state government politics and environment, and he holds a degree in political science from Stanford. Just saying. I feel like every time we say a college, we're like, wait, how are they doing? Right? Okay, I'm going to now introduce Rabbi Debbie Pine. Rabbi Debbie Pine currently is the Vice President of Strategic Philanthropy at the Associate. Yeah. What's the current?
I'm the
here?
Campus Support Director for Hillel.
Yep, sorry. This was the old. Yep. I'm actually going to do the campus part. So in the past, Rabbi Pine was the Vice President of Strategic Philanthropy at the Associated. Before that and after that, she does work at Hillel. She was on campuses, including Hopkins Hillel. For 8 years, she was the executive director also of Tulane Hillel. And now officially, Deb, the title that you have is?
Campus Support Director.
Campus Support Director. Have we never needed a campus support director more? And there are 9 campus support directors. So Debbie, thank you for being here, Rabbi Pine, and telling us sort of about Hillels in particular on campuses nowadays. Professor Andrea Lieber is a professor of religion at Dickinson College. She, I like to say that her classes are standing room only, and probably the most notable thing about Professor Lieber's work is that she deeply impacts her students as well as has profound relationships with other professors. And I think that that's actually one of the things that's been very helpful at Dickinson University. Andrea has published on topics including early Jewish and Christian mysticism. Her course discusses Judaism as a living religion and evolving culture, and she has her PhD from Columbia University. Thank you. Everyone's like, F? I don't know. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get started. Our hope is that we're going to spend about 45 minutes having a conversation here up here with the panelists, and then after that, Jill Suffel's going to come and she's going to facilitate a Q&A to be able to take questions that we may not have asked from you all. So first, just a show of hands, if you have kids on college campuses right now, can you raise your hands? Not yet. Okay. Hi, tellers. Okay, beautiful. If you have grandchildren on college campuses now. Okay. Okay, beautiful. And if you just care deeply about college campuses now. Okay, wonderful. All right, so we're going to start. Oh, yes, thank you. Kids about to go to college campuses. By the way, a really interesting time to be thinking about where you're sending kids, right? Okay, so we're all in this together for sure. So I'm going to start this conversation with a really sort of open question to the three of you. Rabbi Pine, I'm going to hand this to you first. What the heck is going on? And is what we're seeing new to the college campus culture, or has this been happening for a long time or percolating and we're only now realizing?
Thank you all so much for being here and engaging in this conversation. And also, let me just thank my awesome rabbinic colleagues, Rabbi Schwartz and Rabbi Saroken, for bringing you all together. So in my current position, I work on a team of 9 where we try and be the link between Hillel International and our campus communities to make sure that we see ourselves as truly a global movement. So I work with 19 campuses, the 4 in Baltimore, the entire state of Florida, GW, Harvard, MIT, and Brandeis. So I have in normal times, it's a really fun job, like it's the best job ever, because my job is truly to support Hillel professionals and their students. Nobody reports to me. You don't have to listen to me if you don't want to. It's truly just a job to provide support to the field. But what's wonderful, after serving 2 somewhat similar campuses, Hopkins and Tulane, I get really an interesting bird's eye view of what's happening from South Florida all the way to Harvard. And so in answer to your question, sadly, this is not new. We have seen this brewing for a long time. You all have. We've all watched the news. You know, the thing that, 2 things stick out in my mind that I've seen most recently. At the end of August, at Rice University in Texas, the Hillel director was in despair. Why? Because he had partnered extensively with the LGBT groups on campus, providing space in Hillel and doing interfaith LGBTQ discussion groups every single week. Some weeks very few students came, some weeks a lot of students came, but he kept it going because he wanted to be a place for any LGBTQ student, Jewish, non-Jewish, to gather. Right as the school year began, the LGBT group decided we will no longer partner with Hillel. We are done partnering with Hillel because of the way Israel treats Palestinians. And it was a moment where my colleague, also a rabbi, was like, wow, I've been a great partner to this group for 15 years in my work as a Hillel director. And now all of a sudden, out of the blue, they have cut me off. And so the partnership ended abruptly. Jewish students who had never been to Hillel before flocked to Hillel, feeling like I am not safe in the group that was my space on Hillel. So we have seen this brewing for a long time. We have seen these kinds of incidents all throughout the campus. I work with Harvard. You all have seen Harvard in the news. This is not new at Harvard. Israeli students told me for years that when they were in an academic class, other students would refuse to work with them on an academic project because they are Israeli. So Harvard has been an uncomfortable and unsafe place for Jews, not only since October 7th, but for a long time. It's interesting, last year, a graduating senior wrote her senior thesis on what it's like to be a student at Harvard. And I read it, and I was like, oh my God, I gotta talk to this student. So we arranged the call. It was a brilliant thesis, but really terrible, the kinds of things that she described. And again, she described it was worse for the Israeli students. So I got a call with this student and said, wow, do you regret going to Harvard? And she said, no, I've had an amazing experience. It's been a hard place to be a Jewish student, and sometimes these incidents happen, but I would never give up my Harvard experience. It has been amazing, and if somebody asked me if they should apply, I would do it in a second. I would tell anyone to apply to Harvard. So it's a hard moment. This has been brewing for a long time, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. I'll let the others answer, but I'll tell you a little later about, you know, really the 4 areas that we're seeing. Well, should I go on? Yeah, let me just tell you quickly, and then, sorry. So the 4 areas that we're really focusing on Hillel International, that we're seeing extensively from students, is there are 4 areas that they are confronting, you know, really an uncomfortable climate. One is on the campus as a whole, like my example of the LGBTQ student. I have a student in Florida, University of South Florida, which has been the only campus that's on fire in Florida, where a sorority girl had a leadership role in her sorority, having nothing to do with anything, sorority stuff. She was asked by her other fellow leaders to step down because the sorority, not a Jewish sorority, the sorority wasn't comfortable with her as a Jew in a leadership position at this moment. So there are campus-wide, having nothing to do with academics, campus-wide challenges that are making students feel unsafe. Lots of students tell us that they don't want to leave their dorm room, that they don't want to go to the library, that they don't feel comfortable walking around on campus. So that's campus. The other is academics. A lot of professors are saying outrageous things in the classrooms, and when our Jewish students are calling them on it, they fear for their grades, for being ostracized. Students tell us that they don't even feel comfortable writing a paper about Jewish identity out of fear of backlash. The other, you all know, social media. Our students are hounded on social media, devastated by what they see, really assaulted on social media. I made the mistake of, on one of my Florida campuses, I was there, it was 11:30, I was really tired, I just wanted to go to my hotel room. I was like, you guys, just don't look at your social media. Let's just all go home and go to sleep. Just put your phones down and don't look at your social media for the next 7 hours. They nearly killed me. They said, are you kidding? We live on social media. We would never put our phone down, even for 5 minutes. So we got to remember that this is our students' world. See, I knew I'd forget. Oh, and the last place where our students are really feeling it, with you all know just by watching the news, is through university administration. You know, many of our Hillel directors have deep, long-standing relationships with university presidents and deans, but as you've seen, even with the depth of relationship, we have not been able to convince our universities to protect our students. Brandeis and Columbia this week took a step in the right direction, but for the most part, we have felt abandoned by our university administrators. Now, at the same time, we feel for them. They are walking a difficult line, and yet we feel that our university administrators, despite being great partners, despite working with them for decades, we feel like they really have not stepped up to protect our students.
Thank you, Rabbi Pine.
No, that was so many points to jump off of. I will say, like, I think to some extent, the coarsening of the dialogue we have seen nationally since 2015, 2016, has really come to our campuses in a big way. And our kids who have grown up in it see that as the proper way to communicate. You can hurl whatever insults you want in conversation, and social media has made it even worse. I've been shocked actually to discover in the last few weeks that there are campuses that have totally anonymous social media apps where you sign on and everything you say is totally anonymous, intentionally, and sometimes people use that power to target specific students. We have one such incident happening now at one of our local campuses, and I don't know if they're going to be able to get a subpoena to figure out even who it is, because it really guarantees anonymity. And the colleges at least somewhat endorse this, that this is part of life. And so social media has made it worse as well. And yes, the anti-Semitism has existed before this. I mean, the incident that Rabbi Pine refers to in terms of LGBTQ and Hillels. We had one of our local campuses here, I think it was last fall. Students were in leadership of the campus LGBTQ organization and also in leadership at Hillel, and others in the LGBTQ community said you have to choose. You can't do both. Fortunately, the university stepped in and said that is anti-Semitic. That is not a choice that a student should have to make, and I appreciate that, but I don't know how that would go today. I think things have gotten tougher. And we've had the incidents too. There was, I'm sure everyone heard about the Johns Hopkins TA who threatened the grades of her Jewish students on social media. And the university, it was hard to get them to act on it. It was very difficult to get them to act on it. I think ultimately they did, but in a very unsatisfying way. And so the free-flowing conversations of campuses, which is for, we all remember in college, late-night conversations and all, it's gotten ugly. And kids are uncomfortable, and you have to very much self-select. Now, I will say the campuses with Hillels have generally great leadership. And the students, for as much as we focus on it, I also worry a lot about the smaller, the schools that don't have Hillels. And likely the smaller Jewish populations there, and just thinking in the area of the McDaniels, the Stevensons, the Frostbergs, are those students, what type of support do they have? We're trying to reach out a little bit. I mean, even the University of Baltimore and the whole University of Maryland Baltimore campus, the professional schools down there, we're trying to. I'm on a panel in McDaniel in a couple weeks to talk. No, I don't know. I haven't heard from parents there so much, but parents may not know to ask for help. But it is, and as a parent of a kid who's a high school senior now, and you raised the question of being afraid to write about Jewish identity. In a number of his essay questions, he did openly talk about Jewish identity in his applications. And I do, as you're saying that, I'm sitting here wondering, who's reading those applications? And is that going to backfire? I shouldn't have to think that, but maybe. I mean, we don't know the depth of how people feel in administrations and everything else. And even when the college president is supportive, we run into issues with the DEI coordinator or the Office of Minority Relations, because on a lot of campuses, what we have discovered is those offices that are intended to protect, the diversity offices, they see their role as they were hired to protect students of color, Muslim students, LGBTQ students. They don't see the Jewish students as a threatened minority group in any sense. They come with the mentality that Jewish students are part of the white privileged group. And so when there's an incident, it doesn't get the same standard treatment a lot of times as it does if there was an incident involving a student of color or another one of those protected groups, which is a tough mindset. We're working to get them out of that, but it takes time.
Thank you, Howard.
Okay, so if I may, there's so much. I mean, I would feel like we could have this conversation for hours and hours, and I'd like to respond to so many things that both of you folks raised. But let me, if I may, I'd like to take the conversation in a different direction, which deviates a little bit from your question, because I think we all have a good idea of what's going on, right? And what's going on is real and terrifying. And in our lifetime, and I know we have a wide span of generational ages in this room, but I think I can still speak collectively, in our lifetime, it does feel unique. It feels, even though, as Rabbi Pine said, and as Howard was saying, these are things that we've seen percolating for many years. It's kind of like a perfect storm of politics of race, politics of social class, politics of social justice. It's a perfect storm right now. Right at this moment, it does feel uniquely frightening because of what we're seeing, and I think also it's because of the social media that we are also seeing more than we might have seen in an earlier generation. Within minutes, when there was a Free Palestine protest at Tulane, where my daughters are students, within minutes, I had video footage of what was going on there, whereas this would have taken much longer to kind of spread in earlier generations. So what's happening on our campuses is real and frightening, and it does feel like an unprecedented experience. At least, I won't speak for everyone here, but for me. I've never seen it quite this bad, and I've never seen students as unnerved. But what I'd like to do is just talk a little bit in response to just where we've been so far with this conversation. I want to tell you a little bit about my campus. So I work at Dickinson College, and Dickinson is a small liberal arts campus. It's not quite, what you're talking about, Howard, in terms of being so small. Like, we actually have a really active Hillel. We have a full-time Hillel director, a rabbi. We have kosher food, which, by the way, is very popular with our Arab students. We have a lot of infrastructure for Jewish life on campus. We have Jewish studies for more than 50 years on our campus, and I have an endowed chair in Jewish studies. So we have a very, but it's still small. It's still a population of around 2,000 students, and at any given time, we maybe have like between 150 and 200 Jewish students on campus. So it's still a small campus, and I will say, I'm a very big proponent of small liberal arts colleges, partially, and I went to Vassar, which is, by the way, like a hotbed of nightmare, and has been for a long time. But, for many reasons, there have been a lot of challenges there. But small liberal arts colleges are different from large universities in the sense that we're small. I am a department of just a handful of people. I collaborate very closely with Middle East studies. In fact, I wanted to show you something. The very first thing I saw this morning, 7:55 a.m., I got a text message from my colleague. She teaches French and Francophone studies and women's and gender studies. She's Lebanese, she's Christian, and she herself is a survivor of war. She has a really interesting history, and she wrote me this morning. She said, "Morning, my sister. Small news from Lebanon. Many politicians are calling for the recognition of two states, Israel and Palestine. I see this as tremendous progress. We went from free Palestine and Israel doesn't exist to a two-state solution. Clearly, they are not the most vocal yet, but I see this as progress, a small window of hope." I got this message from my Lebanese colleague this morning, Sunday morning, before she was going to church. She sent me this message, and I wanted to share it because I think it's really important at this moment when all of this crazy is happening and all of this really terrifying stuff is facing our young people and our institutions. I want us to remember that a college education is really important, and universities have been transformative for the Jewish people, have been a really important part of our own history of success in this country, in America. It's enabled us to climb the socioeconomic ladder. It's enabled us to go into professions. And so one of the things that I'm really afraid of, one of the things that like sort of gnaws at me, is the way this moment has the potential to undermine our commitment to higher education because of what's happening, because of the fear of free speech. Okay, so I realize that this is not necessarily an answer to the question, but I just want to put it out there as something really important and something I feel like everyone needs to know. College is a place, and it has always been a place, where we are exposed to uncomfortable ideas. That's the point. That's why we send them away. That's why we want them, ideally, to have a roommate maybe they don't get along with, right? We want them to learn to navigate the difficult ideas. And sadly, in many instances, what's been happening is that commitment to freedom of speech and academic freedom has been doing real harm to people because of how challenging it is to maintain the borderline, maintain the boundary between free speech and hate. And one of the things on our campus that I've been really busy with has been trying to reach across differences, trying to listen to those uncomfortable views, to the hate, and really call my colleagues on it. You know, like my friend that I was quoting in the text message, she and I have an agreement. If she says something that I find objectionable, I'm going to tell her. And that's something that can happen when we're exposed to difference and when we're exposed to diversity. And I just don't want us to forget that that's a positive thing. And one thing that's really concerning to me right now is the way the fear of anti-Semitism, which is real, is being weaponized against this institution that's really actually very, very important. And so right now, because and I use the we collectively, not knowing everyone's politics in the room, but because we are really, it appears to the world that we're on the wrong side of history, right? And that's a really hard position, but it's so important that our young people feel equipped to speak confidently as Jews, as Zionists in this moment. And so I think, you know, it's more important than ever that we send our kids to school, and we have to be concerned about all the things that you raised in particular, both of you, really about the administration and about the faculty and about the systems. So,
thank you so much, Dr. Lieber. I want to we're going to come back to a bunch of the things that you spoke about, including sort of DEI moments, also hopefully touching on, you know, for the people that are here that are doing college applications with their kids, you know, the questions of how do they navigate that process. I appreciate very much what you said. And why don't we start next with this question? What are the things, right? Rabbi Pine, you spoke about how this is sort of this has been happening for a while, right? This isn't new. But Professor Lieber spoke about this idea that this moment in time feels like nothing we've ever experienced before. So let's talk about what it is on colleges. Maybe it is, as you were talking about, like a place of discomfort. And I think that there's an interesting distinction to be made between, like, when do we feel uncomfortable and when do we feel unsafe, right? And then, Howard, you were speaking about sort of these freedoms on campuses. Let's talk about what it is in particular about college life that's making our campuses feel like they're the hotbeds right now of anti-Semitism. David Bernstein, formerly of the American Jewish Committee, wrote a book called Woke Anti-Semitism. Barry Weiss had just written an article on it last week called DEI that I actually think is a really important read. But what is it, right, with firsthand experience to college campuses? Is it the curriculum? Is it the faculty? Is it, you know, the rights that we afford our students? What is it that's happening right now?
Can I just go then, and we can go back the other way? I think it's really a combination of things. We know, and those of you who are in the application process or have been in the application process, we know that colleges and universities are under tremendous pressure to diversify their enrollment. It is the case. We know it is the case that it has been much easier for white students to have access to elite educations than for students of color. And so you know that if you've been following the discourse, there's concern that, let's say, the SATs are biased, and even if the exam itself is not biased, who has access to tutors, who has access to private school, you know? So I think colleges and universities have been, for a long time, really trying to focus on diversity, rightfully, and it's been an important move. Jews, by the way, benefited from that same impulse in our early, decades ago, right? There was a time when there were quotas at colleges and universities where Jews weren't admitted, and thank goodness that changed. But I think that just to speak to your specific concern about this sort of woke anti-Semitism and the place of Jews then, we do have, there is a lot of there's a lot of confusion about Jewish identity. And Jews, we know, are a diverse people, but Jews show up on campus often as white and perceived as white and powerful. And specifically right now, I can tell you, we organized a panel, a teach-in at Dickinson, very, very neutral. We really tried to have it be like really fair, and it was very well attended, and I thought it went really great. But there was one speaker, a Jewish speaker, who spoke about American support for Israel and why it was so important in justifying American support for Israel. And that's all anybody's talking about with a panel, you know, that it's like the Jews and Jewish power, and, you know, and so there is that persistent, there is an ideology that that is making things worse right now, I think. That's making things worse for us and making it harder for us to have these sort of generative conversations because, well, first of all, I think Jews are oftentimes very quick to reject our white privilege, you know? Like, oh, I don't know, should I check white on the box of the census, you know? Because I don't feel that way. But the truth is that we are perceived and presented as white, so.
I also think part of the issue on campus is a feeling of betrayal from students who see themselves as progressive and have joined so many of the progressive movements of the last few years. They have stood there during Black Lives Matter and stood with students when LGBTQ rights have been questioned, and stood there and went out and marched when, joined in the protests when there was going to be the Muslim travel ban for this, you know, many of us did in so many of those places. And we stand there and we support bills to help immigrants because we ourselves were immigrants and faced many of those challenges when our parents or grandparents came to this country. And so we were instinctively supportive of these. And suddenly on campuses, the Palestinian movement, whatever phrase you want to call it, has positioned themselves very smartly as the narrative of the oppressed group. And so if you're supporting Israel, if you're Jewish, you're now seen as the oppressor. And so after all of these years of kids in high school and college supporting all these other groups, now all of a sudden they're turning on us. And I think that has caused the feeling of betrayal, a lack of safety, a lack of where do I belong? Because these were groups I stood with and I was with, and now they're not with me. And it's really hard. It's really hard, you know, from not a college level, but here in this state, the state's largest Latino advocacy group issued a blistering statement condemning Israel, filled with anti-Semitism in the beginning of the week. And we've stood with them on so many issues. And so it was really hard to see that, and have been having tough conversations with them since then this week. And hopefully they're going to embrace learning about anti-Semitism, learning a more accurate, thoughtful narrative of Israel. But it puts us, and I think students are seeing that on campus, and they may not have the ability to have the more thoughtful conversation because it's happening on a college instantaneously and on chalkboards in campus squares, and you see nasty things being written and you hear the chants and you don't know where to go. And so I think that's become also a big part of this.
Thanks. Yeah, Howard, along those lines, you know, this concept of intersectionality, that all suffering is the same, you know, plays right into the problem of those progressive students trying to find their place and where it puts the Jewish community. Look, and Andrea, as you mentioned, you know, Jews in power, something we've all studied at the Hartman Institute a lot. We live at a time when Jews have tremendous power. As much as this has been a terrible moment for us, just 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of Education came to Towson to speak directly to Jewish students to hear about their experiences with anti-Semitism. Doug Emhoff came to Cornell last week. So we have a sense of power today that we certainly didn't have a generation ago. And, you know, if you've read Dara Horn's wonderful book, Everybody Loves Dead Jews, there's a lot of tension and challenges around how people feel about a once oppressed group, a continued oppressed group of Jews, really rising and having power in the world today.
Thank you all for your responses. So let's talk about what we do and how we can both support our students on campuses, and when I say our, I mean collective students on campuses, and also how we might be able to support change, which gets me to a different question, which is what actually needs to change. Okay? So how can we support our collective students? How can we support an important change, and what is it that needs to change?
One thing I forgot to say on your last question. Look, the other challenge, too, is as our conversation in America has become very siloed, so has the dialogue on campus. A Hopkins professor who's been a great partner to us, who is teaching on campus, said to me last week he could not find one colleague who would dialogue with him and students from the other side. So we've become very siloed in our perspective, and as we try, I'm looking at Don Engel, a wonderful partner at UMBC, you know, on our UMBC board and a great partner in the university, as we contemplate a moment where we can actually talk openly about this with our students. For lots of reasons, we're far from there. Very few campuses are actually engaging in dialogue that is open and broad. Hopefully, we will get there eventually. But it's a challenge, in part because our own political discourse was so siloed even before all of this began. Look, we at Hillel have clear instructions that I encourage you to share with your students. We feel strongly that when there are protests against Israel, we ask our Jewish students not to engage. We provide alternative educational experiences, you know, calming wellness experiences at Hillel, lots of free food, but as we've seen at Tulane and other campuses, when Jewish students engage, it's bad news. So please encourage your students not to engage in counter-protests. There are over 400 documented anti-Semitic incidents so far this year on campus, when the most we've had until this year was 50. So we are seeing unprecedented amounts of anti-Semitic incidents on our campuses, and we are telling our students to report every single one of them. If your student has an experience that feels questionable, we are telling our students to report them through their university, but also we have a specific website called reportcampushate.org. Look, we have also partnered with the ADL and with the Brandeis Center and with actually several private law firms to offer free legal support to any student who has encountered any kind of anti-Semitic incident. Because some of this is confusing. I mean, a Hopkins student said to me just Friday, he said, I took a Bible class, ancient biblical Hebrew, with this teacher who I thought was really awesome. And I took this class last year, and it was great. And my friend told me, who is now in this ancient biblical Hebrew class, that the professor used to just say Israel in talking about ancient Israel, and now all of a sudden has started saying Israel-Palestine. And the student said to me, that's so triggering and so strange, but is that really anti-Semitism? That is exactly the kind of thing we are asking our students to report. What was your other question, Dana? I'll let these guys go.
What do we need to do to support our students? What do we need to do to support change on campuses, and what is it that needs to change?
Awesome. I'll let these guys answer. But in terms of your students, amazing that they have such caring clergy here at Beth El. Great. We want our students to connect with their home clergy, but we also really want our students to connect with Hillel. So even if your student has never connected with Hillel, we did a talk with Baltimore Hebrew last week where my husband's a rabbi, and there were 2 students on the panel, one from Northeastern and one from Penn. And the Penn student said, until October 7th, I wasn't really connected with the Jewish community on campus. I was doing other stuff. But the minute that happened, I found my place at Hillel. and our communities are strong. We are seeing more students engage with Jewish life now than ever, and I just encourage you to encourage your students to find not only their awesome rabbis here in Baltimore, but also their Jewish community on campus.
And Rabbi Pine, I want to just add to that we've found with our students that both Hillel and also Chabad have both been really helpful resources in terms of providing a place that they feel a sense of belonging and safety.
Yeah, and we've actually, on campuses where Chabad and Hillel would never partner, they are now good partners. So, silver lining.
The community's coming together, and let's hope it can continue. So talking to our local Hillel directors, it's, you know, obviously they could all use more donations, but I'm not going to sit here and make that big pitch. But they could also use, sometimes it's extra sets of hands. Like they have staff, but like in times like this, they need more, even if it's like, if you have any kind of relationship, like, can you know, you want to come and just sit and have dinner with the students one night if they're having a dinner at the Hillel and talk to them and hear them. They need people just to listen and be in conversation. They also need things as simple as, because of course the kosher food's all in Pikesville, but the college campuses aren't. Like, would you be available to drive a food order from one of the Pikesville places to Towson or to Goucher or to UMBC? Something as simple as that can help take the stress off the campuses and make it all flow more easily. I know it seems almost trivial, but little things like that will help make everything run more smoothly. I struggle, we've all seen the threats happening nationally of big donors threatening to withhold donations from universities if they're not acting well. I don't know how I feel about that. I have very mixed feelings. Like, yes, sometimes that can make change, and sometimes that can just cause greater resentment. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think conversation and partnership are probably more important, probably a thought out letters, rather than, you don't have to make the threat explicit, but like the letters can make a difference. What else needs to change? It's very hard to identify everything that needs to change, other than we need to keep the pressure on administrations. When stuff happens, we need them to be partners who are supportive. We need them to show up and talk to our students. When a university president drops in for you know, a Hanukkah party, a brunch, a dinner, just sits and talks to students, it has an impact. And sometimes we're discovering what they're saying to the students privately doesn't quite match what they're saying publicly. We kind of, you know, it's yes, the statement that they issued publicly wasn't particularly strong, but they showed up and said all the right things to our students, and that was, or they showed up at our vigil, and that was meaningful. And then we also see them show up at a vigil sometimes, or something for the Palestinian students, that sometimes is filled with anti-Semitic rhetoric, and you wonder, why aren't they condemned? Why aren't they calling it out on the spot? And I know they're in a hard spot, but, you know, our rallies, our vigils are not about hate. And it can be incredibly frustrating to see administrators show up at vigils or at events that you do hear anti-Israel, anti-Jewish hate. And I don't think they have figured out yet how to walk that line, or how to condemn in the moment when they hear things or see things that are anti-Semitic, but I wish they would. I wish they would be willing to stand up for what they tell us privately. I think that maybe is one of the more challenging things we have to get them to.
Thank you, Howard.
On my campus, very early on, shortly after October 7th, I asked the president of our college, are you going to make a statement? And he said, well, you know, I don't really want to. I don't like to, you know, take sides in any conflict. I don't think I'm going to. But let me consult with my DEI person, and this is a college president who has a really excellent record on matters related to anti-Semitism. We have had incidents under his tenure, and he's been great, and he was previously a judge, and also had a really good track record. And so when he issued a statement, I started hearing immediately from alumni who are really angry about the statement that it wasn't strong. And at the very same time, one of my colleagues, as a Judaic Studies professor, I'm also affiliated with Middle East Studies at our college. And our students who study Middle East Studies can study Hebrew or Arabic as their language requirement. So I have a really close relationship with them. They sent a message saying, thank you, President Jones, for this wonderful statement. I'm hearing great things about it. And it was a big group chat. And then the president wrote back, really pleased with himself. I'm so glad. I'm really happy to hear it. This is so wonderful. And I looked around thinking, like, who's going to say something? And I realized that it was me, because I was the only one who was going to say anything. So I wrote to the whole group, and I said, this is not what I'm hearing. The statement, and I said very specifically, does not condemn Hamas, does not condemn the atrocities of October 7th, and in failing to do so, it seems that you think they might be okay. And he got really mad at me. And I don't know, for those of you who know me, it was really hard when the president of my college was really mad at me. I didn't like that feeling at all. It was really upsetting. But it actually really opened the door to conversation. And so I want to go back to what you said. This thing about pulling financial support, while that is often, I think it feels like the way that we have power, it also reiterates this idea that Jews have money and it's the Jewish money running things. I really do think that speaking specifically, being able to speak out specifically to these moments, and these issues when they come, if they're coming from the faculty or if they're things your students are hearing, it's really important to, and not just to confront them, but to be able to confront them specifically, not resorting to extreme, you're racist, you're anti-Semitic. Like, it's the slinging of labels that's really damaging all around, and that I think silences productive conversation. I will say, what I'm doing on my campus is I'm spending a lot of time listening, answering students' questions. They don't know. They don't know. They'll come to me, Professor Lieber, what do I say when my friends are telling me Israel is committing genocide? What do I say? My friends are why don't you think apartheid is the right word to describe the political context of Israel? And they really want to know, and so I spend a lot of time talking, listening, and I'm not an expert in the Middle East, That's not my field, but I feel like right now what we can do is really lean in to Jewish education, really lean into the moral leadership of our clergy. Thank God, right? Thank God we have institutions like our synagogues, like the associated agencies, places where we can find the moral clarity and the moral leadership that we need right now when there's so much in the world that's undermining our confidence. A lot of times, I'll text my friends. I'm like, oh, you guys, I got this article. It's so hard to read from, some of my colleagues. And am I on the wrong side of this? Are we on the wrong side of this? Are they right? Are they right? And it's that's how I feel. And I'm the grown-up in the room. So, I feel like we just really need to lean into our institutions. And right now I'm having a renewed love affair with the Siddur, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that happens with the Siddur is that when you're reading it, sections that have never resonated with you before, right? I mean, usually when you read about the prayers about when my enemies come to strike me down.
Why are they so paranoid? Why is it so?
Now we're yes, this is exactly what I need, right? What to do in these situations. Let's keep going a little bit deeper into the. Actually, let's change modes for a minute. Let's go to hope. I feel like it's too early to be hopeful. That's my own sense. But I do think that we're also seeing some positive changes that are just a baby step in a long, long journey that we're going to need to make in order to get to a place that feels good and comfortable and a place where we feel like we can go to sleep at night feeling a sense of peace. So my question for you is, where have you seen sort of a ray of hope? And if you were going to commit yourself to one thing that might make an impact on a campus, what would it be?
I'm gonna stick with the relationships, and with humanity, with my humanity, putting my humanity first. I feel like this is where I've seen it. One of my colleagues came to me after this panel that we organized, and she told me that she was so upset by the panel that I thought was amazing, by the way. Like, I thought it was so good. She told me she was so upset by the panel that she went back to her office and cried because she felt like it was unbalanced, and she felt so much pain. And I felt really bad that she felt that way. And I don't agree with her. I think she's wrong. And at the same time, she's my colleague, and I have to acknowledge that those are her feelings. And so this is why it's really hard. And I have one of the other really big challenges of working on a college campus right now is that the people who are most affected by this situation are the ones doing all the work. Like, we're the ones who have to do all the organizing, all the listening, all the talking. It's totally exhausting. But because this is it's like an odd thread of commonality, that we're going through something. And so I feel like for me, it's about the relationships with my students, where they trust me, they want to know what I think, but ultimately at the end of the day, I'm just sharing my perspective so that they can develop their own. I'm not telling anybody what to think on my college campus, and maybe that's not the case, in a lot of places. But so I would say I'm dedicated to the relationships, to reaching across difference, to listening to things that are uncomfortable and hard, and also trying to strengthen my own resolve and remembering why I believe what I do and what I know to be true about the strength of the Jewish people. And also the shocking realization that the past 100 years probably is like a blip in time of Jewish history, right? It's like a tiny little moment, honestly, when we look at the long journey of our people. So,
thank you.
So I find hope that in something that Rabbi Pine said actually too, which is the kind of the resurgence of students on campuses turning toward Jewish life more and more. And maybe it's just out of a sense of self-protection, but my son's a senior in high school right now. Before October 7th, I don't know how active he might have gotten in Hillel and Jewish life when he goes off to college next fall. I think now, as he sees what's happening, I'm pretty confident he's going to want to engage much more significantly and is thinking much more about it now. And obviously, we've all talked about anti-Semitism on campuses before October 7th, and I've done panels then, and one of the things I always said was, look, as much as we're focusing on the individual incidents, at the end of the day, our kids on campuses are generally safe. The Hillels or whatever organizations are protecting our kids. I know the incidents get lots more attention due to social media, and I know there's lots more incidents happening, but our kids physically are safe, and emotionally, if we can be there to support them, they will come through, I believe, safely and stronger for it. But we have to be there to support them. There's a little piece of me that says maybe college isn't the right place, isn't a safe place, or I need to go send him to a campus in Israel somewhere, or something like that, where it's going to be an almost all Jewish population. I don't think so. I think the diversity is going to be good for him and for what he wants to do, and I just have to trust we're going to all be looking out for them.
Thanks, Howard.
Thanks, Howard. Look, what gives me hope is our students have shown up beautifully. We all worry, we all worry a little bit about Gen Z. you know, and how they communicate and how they respond to things, but these students have been strong and articulate and present and have stepped up incredibly and have led just beautifully. So I have tremendous hope in the future of the Jewish people because, look, I've devoted most of my rabbinate to working with college students, and these college students are our future, and I believe our future is safe with them because they are amazing and they care deeply about Judaism and they care deeply about Israel. Howard's younger child, Maya, spoke Friday night at Baltimore Hebrew, and she spoke about her connection through Jewish camp in meeting Israelis, campers and counselors. And because of social media, which is not always our favorite thing, but because of social media, she and other kids have deep connections with Israelis. Because of Birthright Israel, we send hundreds of thousands of Jewish college students to Israel every year. And I believe those connections are strong. I believe in the work that we are collectively doing on our campuses. And I really believe that one of the most important moments in our students' lives for connecting and building their Jewish identities is the college experience. So let's continue to really support them and encourage them, but not too hard, don't push too hard to go to Hillel, to find their Jewish voices and to help us continue to create really meaningful, deep, broad, pluralistic opportunities for our college students to find their Jewish identities.
Thank you, Rabbi Pine. We're going to now switch modes. I'm going to turn the Q&A over to my colleague and friend, Jill Suffel. And you'll have an opportunity now to ask all of your questions. So thank you all for, I see Steve Silber's raising his hand before we start, and Dana Garanzik and Sonia Goodman. All right, I'm going to turn things over, and why don't we start up front if that's all right. Let's start with Dana, who's been a constant writer and supporter of our college students.
First of all, thank you for coming here to speak with us. Oh, sure. Thank you for coming to speak with us. This is a really important topic, and the turnout just is a reflection of how many people are interested in learning about this. I feel like, in some sense, we are on the defensive, because I feel like, from everything that I've read, a lot of satellite campuses have been created, and a lot of infiltration started about 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago, planning almost like a Marxist approach to infiltrating these campuses and kind of indoctrinating students at a younger level, whether it's high school or it seems like more on college campuses, the same way it did with, let's say, Cuban history, like Castro, or, you know, Russia, all of the like Marxist regimes. And my question is, how are we going to take that's not the Jewish way, but what are we doing behind the scenes to kind of play catch up? Are we working with professors to kind of take back that role at universities? Because I feel like we're kind of behind.
Thanks, Dana. I actually don't think we're behind. I actually think we're ahead, and that we actually have very deep relationships with universities, not only with university presidents, not only with Judaic studies and Jewish faculty as a whole, but we actually have created those relationships. Yeah.
But what I mean is, my understanding is professors have almost been implanted in universities, and this has kind of been planned in the makings for a long time. So students, these formidable years where their minds are being molded, that's why I'm comparing more like a Marxist approach to teaching, where the education starts at a much younger age deliberately. How are we taking a proactive approach of making sure that the Judaic or
For sure, and we're definitely working to teach more and more about Zionist history. I mean, that is a challenge that even our own Jewish students in our own religious schools and day schools don't have the depth of knowledge of the history of Israel, and we're working hard to continue to teach that and to teach it broadly and to get not only Jewish students, but non-Jewish students as well to Israel.
Yeah, I'll just briefly add that I know, for example, we have helped fund some trips that have happened of like bringing faculty from some of the area colleges to Israel to help learn. And I know there's also the amazing program that Hillel has done where they bring Jewish with non-Jewish student leaders to Israel as kind of it's almost a kind of a birthright trip. So that we're trying to build that on the campus, a deeper understanding.
So admittedly, my experience is limited. I went to Columbia. You heard I went to Vassar College. I went to Columbia, and then I've been at Dickinson for 26 years. And I have 2 colleagues who are ethnically Palestinian. I have one who's Egyptian, one who's Lebanese, one who's Turkish. And I think that's the entire Arab population of my campus. All the other professors who teach Middle East studies and Middle East history are white. Some are European, some are American. So it's not my experience at the institutions where I've worked where I see that agenda that you're talking about. But I'm not going to deny that it might be true at other places where, maybe there are philanthropic initiatives, that place people. The truth is, academia is cutthroat. It's really hard to get an academic position, and so I don't see that where I work. At the same time, my school, Dickinson, is a place that has invested in Jewish studies. We have an endowed chair, we have a Jewish Life Center, we have a long commitment of the institution to Jewish studies as an important part of a liberal arts curriculum. That said, my field of Jewish studies is itself completely riddled with dissent over this right now. I was actually just reading about it yesterday. There's a whole organization that's cropped up to critique the Association for Jewish Studies for being anti-Zionist. That's the Jewish Studies program, okay? So I think that to the extent that there's bias, I would agree with Debbie. I would agree that we aren't behind, right? We aren't behind, but we may, there have been other educational priorities, right? Like the liberal arts in general are struggling. Jewish studies isn't as popular as international business and management, or like the other things that students are, think they need to study to make money. My cousin who works at Duke says there are 2 majors at Duke University, pre-health and pre-wealth. That's it. And so the humanities in general are really struggling. So I feel like one thing we could be doing is, investing more in those kinds of programs and not shaming our students for wanting to study poetry and philosophy and English literature and things like that.
So we just have to make sure that when you ask the question, you speak in the mic so the recording can get it.
I represent the generation whose grandchildren and children are looking at colleges right now for a grandson who is about to graduate from high school. So the interest really is the selection. And to me, the elephant in the room, and maybe it's something that is in the control of the administration of these universities and colleges, is that there's no, at least announced effort to root out the source of all of these protests and what appears to be spontaneous, but which we all believe to be orchestrated and planned by some people who are agitators and have infused themselves into the campus culture and a community. So what efforts are being made and what pressure is being put by you and by faculty on the administration to root out the causes? Thank you, Bob. Okay. To root out the causes, to put economic pressure on parents. Remember, these students aren't the students aren't paying their own way through college. Their parents are paying the way. They're getting scholarships. Put economic pressure on the administration to send letters to the parents saying, we're not going to accept this. And if your child is an agitator or is found to be an agitator, we're going to invite them to leave. There has to be something that would make the administration wake up and be responsive. It's the question that nobody seems to be able to answer.
Yeah, good idea.
I have a comment and a question. My comment is that it is not just the Jewish people who are withholding their money from the colleges. It's non-Jewish people too, and I think we need to recognize that and make that public, that it's, you know, it's not a Jewish thing. My question is, you said when these students come to you and say, what do I say when somebody tells me that, you know, Israel is committing genocide, but you never said what you should say.
So I have two kids, one on a campus in New York for grad school and one college campus. And a lot of my friends, what we're asking right now is, what do we tell our kids about wearing their Jewish stars or their hides or whatever it is out in public for the fear of right away they're being, oh, you're Jewish and things happening to them? And how would you address what to say to your child when they say, should I be wearing it? Should I not be wearing it? Is it safe? Is it not safe? Because that's a lot of what the parents are talking about too.
Start with those three.
How much time do we have? Ooh. It's a lot. Okay, so I'll just throw out a few thoughts and then, you know, we'll see what we do. It's very challenging because, again, it often comes down with this issue of the protests and with the issue of student safety, and it's all interrelated, okay? On a college campus and in the United States of America, people have a right to protest, right? There's a right to protest. On my campus, right? On my campus, if someone had one of those signs that said, like, throw Jews in the trash can, you know, like those things that you've seen on social media, or kill Jews, or there would be a very, very, that would not be tolerated. That would not be tolerated on my campus. And why it's sometimes tolerated, it seems, is because we are dealing with outside organizations that come in, like at Tulane, there was this protest that got violent was initiated by an outside organization, and the campus didn't have the preparation to address it or deal with it. It's one of the things that makes this so fraught is that, and I think I really appreciated actually, Debbie, what you said, like when there's a protest, stay away, disengage from it. And at the same time, I would say, don't put away your Jewish star, right? It's important to be seen right now. On October 7th, I changed my Facebook profile picture to an Israeli flag. And I comment, you know, that's who I am in the world of social media. My picture is an Israeli flag. And you know what? Some of my colleagues who are engaged with me on social media, they don't like it. It's upsetting to them, you know, it's triggering to them, but they need to see it. They need to see it. And so, you know, I know for me that it's caused me to personally to kind of double down in my assertion of my own identity, because without it, we become invisible and abstract. Like we just sort of like disappear into that abstraction. I can't go into the whole long story of what I tell the students about why it's inappropriate to accuse Israel of genocide and apartheid now, but I'd be happy to talk with you about what I say. But of course, I tell them, I try to equip them with language that helps them respond to those kinds of claims.
I want to speak to the first question that talked about like outside groups versus speakers, and I think it's important that the students on campus who may disagree with us but who do protest that are their own doing, that's their right. That's part of the college experience, and I get that as long as they're not crossing over into hate speech or threatening speech. I am more troubled when, as you point out, when you see the outside groups coming onto campuses and fomenting it or creating an outside march and then students are joining. I think some schools have taken steps to limit that, and I think that's important. I think other schools haven't thought about it previously and are now scrambling to catch up. And I do think there's the campus community debate is about the campus community. It's about the students, it's about the faculty. It's not about an outside advocacy groups coming in and creating a different situation where they often ratchet it up too because they don't have consequences like students do to say more hurtful things. There was a march at Towson University recently, and all of the university Palestinian march, all of the university affiliated speakers were careful with their language. There was one guy from the outside who came in, and it was an anti-Semitic filled diatribe. And Jewish people who staff and students who were there filed an appropriate complaint and said this crossed the line and it was from someone not affiliated with the university. What are you going to do? And I think they're still working that through. But I think that's a really important distinction. I also agree about continuing to wear your Jewish symbols. The incidents are few and far between, and I also say put a mezuzah on your dorm room door too. I mean, now is a time more than ever to show your Jewish pride and stand up for yourself and stand up for our people and wear the Baltimore Stands with Israel bracelet or the Taylor Swift-like bracelet with the name of a hostage, like many of us are doing, and that kind of thing. I think it's all important.
I didn't know you were a Swiftie, Harry. I would say in terms of Jewish symbols, I mean, I always say this, but I got to remember to practice what I preach with my own children, but college students are adults. You want to encourage them to make their own decision. And we have seen students fall on both sides of this question. We have seen students proudly wear their kippah or their Star of David on campus, in some of the most contentious, most difficult campuses to show their Jewish identity, and we have seen other Jewish students say, no, forget it. I don't need this, I'm gonna hide my symbols. Either is acceptable. The most important thing is that your college student makes his or her own decision. And just, in connection to what Howard said, all these campuses have different policies around free speech, and as Howard said, they're really grappling to where is the line. And what we saw this week at both Columbia and at Brandeis, that the line was a specific violent threat to a person. At Brandeis, on social media, the Hillel director was directly threatened, and that was the line, and they banned SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, and Jewish Voice for Peace off campus. And same with Columbia. It was a direct physical threat. Now, we'd like, the line to be potentially somewhere else, but that's really what's happening with these universities right now. It's different for private schools versus public schools, and it's very complicated.
Good. I'll do the same thing. I'll ask a couple of questions and then bring it back up.
Hi, Rafi, good to see you all. One thing just to quickly answer, I think it's gone unnoticed, but the Biden administration has actually said that any organization that is found to be supportive of a terrorist organization, the federal funding for that university can be taken away. So I think that's going to start to actually cut down a lot of the outside agitation and all of those things. My question for you is, can you be really specific and tachless about what's a website students can go to where there are 10 talking points, like I think ADL has like 10 talking points on countering those questions. And I know that there's a legal website people can go to that's a partnership with Hillel, ADL, and law firms that you mentioned. And then also my follow-up question, Rabbi Pine, is there's a lot of mental health and trauma and PTSD issues and challenges. I know CUNY in New York, their Hillel, has an amazing network of social workers that they've set up traditionally for other reasons that have mental health, professional mental health workers and case managers. Is there talk about Hillel International supporting that program and making it broader to give them the emotional support that they need?
Thank you all for being here and for organizing this. The gentleman earlier talked about an elephant in the room, and my elephant in the room is when are we going to stand up and take liberalism back? These ideas are illiberal. We have allowed them to and the campuses have become ideologically captured over a period of decades. So that's my question. Is now that I've lost my train of thought, how do we get these ideas out? How do we get rid of safe spaces? How do we engage with ideas that we hate? Because that's the only way that we defeat them.
In answer to we've actually done a lot of, we've done a lot on, no, thanks, I'll give that back. Hill, we've done a lot on mental health. Actually, in the 2 weeks following the war, we collected $2 million to distribute to campuses. A lot of that went to security. Campuses could get up to $15,000, sadly, to hire armed guards like we all have in our synagogues. We now have that mostly in our Hillels as well. And also, we've done extensive work in bringing in social workers and psychologists. The challenge, though, of course, is like at University of Florida, we brought in 15 psychologists and social workers. You know, the students stood on the other side of the room. It really took us as Hillel staff members to say, oh, you mentioned that you haven't been sleeping. Let me introduce you to my friend. And so sometimes it really is about a handoff and that students want a personal connection. Look, what we've also created in our Hillels is space where students can talk to their own counselor privately in the Hillel building. So we've invested a lot of funding in making sure that not only do we continue those programs that we've started with COVID, but that we have even more counselors available on campus and at our Hillels to talk to our students.
So Rafi, in answer to your first question, where to go for stuff, like there are definitely places. ADL's got good stuff. We have good stuff at the Baltimore Jewish Council website. Hillel Network does too. There was a particularly good 4-pager that I'm trying to remember the name of. I'll look it up in my email when I'm not speaking and then circle back to it. But it was that I shared with my daughter, who's a sophomore in high school, because she was having some difficult conversations with some of her friends. To the extent one of her friends was coming over and she said, maybe we should remove the Baltimore Stands with Israel yard sign from in front of our house because it might make her friend uncomfortable. I said, no. Let me give you this. You guys can have a conversation. And I think that also gets back to the question that the person in the back asked about the kind of continuing to have the difficult conversations. I think the best thing our colleges can do is to create those opportunities. I had lunch yesterday with a a group of students from my alma mater who had a program in Washington, D.C. And we were talking about their experiences, and a bunch of them are in a foreign policy class, and the Israel conflict wasn't on the original curriculum, obviously, but the person teaching it, who's a former high up in the Defense Department, was, brought it in as one of, so his class was about Ukraine, it was about a couple other things. He did a whole session just talking about what's happened in Israel and laying out the issues, and there were very different points of view in the room, but it was a really, what it sounded like from the guy teaching it and from the students was, it was exactly the kind of conversation that students need to have in a controlled setting, in a setting where you're going to respect everybody, not in a yelling at each other in the campus quad because they're dueling protests, but we have to be, our college professors, I think, have to be willing to pivot to the news of the day sometimes and have conversation in a classroom talking about the issues in a thoughtful way, in an educated way, not in a way of tossing labels at each other. I think that will make a difference.
I'm not sure that I have anything new to add. You guys both articulated everything that I was thinking. I will say, the mental health piece is huge. We thought, we're still recovering from the mental health crisis of COVID. Like the students who are seniors now in college started during a what they call the COVID-y times, a very, very challenging situation. And now they are really feeling this, and it's really hard. And I think that's one of the reasons so many of us in the classroom are actually finding ourselves doing a kind of labor that we're not used to doing, in the sense that, I'm not a trained mental health professional, but I'm doing a lot of counseling, a lot of listening, a lot of comforting, and also with my colleagues too, I will say. So I think that, I think the question about where to go, it's complicated, because I share a lot of links with my students, websites, links, here's where you can go. But one thing we know about our students these days is that they don't love institutions, Like any website that comes from like an official Jewish organization is automatically suspect for them, like at the same time that they want the knowledge and they want the information. So, I'm trying to find like TikTok people, who are saying things that are productive and helpful, but it's really not easy. It's really not easy because that's such a minefield, It's such a minefield, and I do think it's better to sort of get off.
I'll just say the sheet I was thinking about, it's from an organization called Boundless, had a very helpful, I think it was 4 pages printed out, that was Boundless. If you Google that, Boundless, they had, and it's I know we posted it at the Baltimore Jewish Council and other places, super helpful for high school age kids, I assume college kids too, to kind of just thoughtful responses to a lot of the criticisms you'll hear in a couple of bullet points for each one.
And check out Hillel.org. We also tell our students to read Times of Israel, that I'm sure many of you are reading as well. The site that Rafi mentioned is legal protection, legal-protection.org for any of those legal claims. And check out Hillel.org, our website, which has a ton of resources. Also, CNN tonight at 9 is doing a whole,
So I think I probably have time to get one more question, but I just wanted to bring up a couple of things. First, I'm going to give each of you a chance at the end to kind of say one last thing. I do have some pamphlets that are up here that I'd be happy to share with everyone in the room. I probably have enough for everyone. And also, if you are a Beth El member, if you're not a Beth El member, I am populating a list of college students through Beth El, so please email me, jill.s@bethelbalto.org, and I will add your child, your grandchild, your niece, your nephew, anyone to our list, and our clergy is taking note of that, and we will continue. We're going to start to reach out specifically to college students because, as you mentioned, they are adults, and it is really important, I think, for them to not only feel a connection to Judaism, but to also feel a connection to their synagogue. Some of them are very far away, and it might feel nice to get an email or a package or a text from Rabbi Schwartz, Rabbi Saroken, or anyone. So with that, I'm going to go ask one more question, and then I'm going to give it to the three of you to do some closing remarks.
Oh, do you want me to get the microphone?
Oh, it's here. It's this microphone.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jen Grossman. I'm in a unique position where I have 3 children that are 2 in college at 2 different schools that are handling it very differently, one at UF and one at WashU. I also have 3 children that went to different high schools, middle schools and lower schools, who also are handling it very differently. And I don't know if this is the appropriate place to ask you, but it seems to be that we're just not starting early enough. We're not educating our children early enough to not fall into the woke humanitarian piece. We've raised them to be compassionate, young, free-thinking adults, and then when they go off and they're found to be put in a position of, if you support Israel, you are not a human being, you are committing murder, and they appeal to these kids in a way that we failed them. We have not equipped them with the correct information. And just now I'm hearing stories from my 2 college kids, one who went to a day school where obviously, has felt none of this, but one that went to a non-day school who has told me stories of his high school days where he faced anti-Semitism blatantly, but didn't speak up about it, didn't tell us about it, didn't for fear of us ripping him out of there. But what are we doing for our younger children to educate them now so that they can go off and be the adults that we claim they are, which, yes, they're legally adults, but no, they're not. They're still calling us 50 times a day for advice and how do we deal with this. But what are we doing on the younger ages? We know, with all due respect, Hebrew school is dying out. They're not learning it in Hebrew school. They're graduating, and there's this big gap between religious school, Hebrew school. I know. Let me rephrase that. There's a big gap between Hebrew school and college that we're missing a major opportunity in educating and in equipping our young adults with the information they need to be respectful, to be heard, to be confident to stand up for what they believe in and not scared, but they can't. We failed them. They're not equipped to do it. And what do we do about it?
She said one. Okay, so one of the other things I do in my life, aside from work at Dickinson College, is that for the past 14 years, I've been the educational director at Camp Ramah in the Poconos, a Zionist summer camp. And I really hear what you're saying. I think, Jen, I feel like we've been complacent, right? We've been giving our kids Zionism, we've been giving them Israel, we've been giving them Jewish education, but it's been a little parv, to use an expression, right? Because we've been afraid of conflict, So like my kids, they went off. My older daughter did a gap year. She went off to live in Israel, and she was doing a program in Tel Aviv. And she was like, my kids are going through life, and it's not enough that they know that Israel invented the iPhone, the chip in the iPhone. It's not enough. Yay, shakshuka. Yay, chocolate balls. Like that, it's not enough. And I think that is something that we are unfortunately, some of us have seen it, but I think now there's like really a deep understanding that we have not served the young people well by sheltering them or by avoiding conversations about the conflict, right? About avoiding talking about the question of occupation, the question of Israel and its militarism. We haven't done anybody any favors by avoiding those conversations, as much as we've done it to develop and inspire love for Zionism and love for Israel. That's my 2 cents on it.
Sure. Well, I'll throw out a couple of different thoughts. Number one is I do think places like Jewish camp and all are a great place to learn. The trips to Israel are super helpful. Sorry. But I also think, look, they're not going to They're not going to learn it as in-depth in the public schools or the private schools as they need to. It's incumbent upon us to educate ourselves and find ways to have that organic, authentic conversation with our kids. Back in when the Gaza conflict of 21, I remember my daughter, who at the time was, I guess, 8th grade, coming downstairs and a couple of videos she saw on TikTok and asking me about them, and me breaking away from whatever I was doing and saying, okay, let's talk it through. Let's talk about the facts. And same thing now, having those conversations, sharing resources, not forcing it on her, but when she's ready, when she's seeing something that bothers her, finding a way to have that conversation and being willing to have it and talk to her. And I think we all have to do that more and more. And I would encourage you, for those of you who have kids in college, when they come home for Thanksgiving or whatever, look for a quiet moment to talk to them one-on-one about what's going on, not at the Thanksgiving table in front of all the grandparents and the aunts and uncles, and it becomes a whole spectacle of all of them talking about how awful the college campuses are, but just a genuine conversation of what they're experiencing and how can you support it, I think is really important.
And just keep in mind that, like, again, my favorite part of working with college students is for the first time in their lives, it's all on them, whether to opt in or not. You know, we as parents send them to Hebrew school, you know, require bar mitzvah, we send them to Jewish camp. What's awesome about the college campus is it's 100% their call. So follow their lead, let them drive the conversation, encourage them to engage in Jewish life, but don't force the conversation. And there are lots of amazing opportunities to engage. Let's continue to encourage our kids to find them. And really, the college campus, as much as it's toxic right now, I am hopeful that over time, we will get to a place of real dialogue. I was at Goucher on Wednesday, and a student came into the Hillel space and said, I'm a non-Zionist, and I don't always feel comfortable in this space. And as we started talking to her, it was clear that she actually wasn't a non-Zionist, that she didn't really know what it meant, and she had never been to Israel, and she really wanted to go. And so there are lots of opportunities to teach and reach these students. If they say they're anti-Israel, they're non-Zionist, or this or that, give them the space to figure it out. Remember how we were as college students. It's a journey. And again, as I said before, I have tremendous hope in these students. They are stepping up, they understand, they want to learn, and our Hillel spaces and our Jewish spaces and our synagogues are amazing spaces for them to find their Jewish identity. So support the Hillels.
One last thing. I know there are probably 50 more questions in this room, and we could probably do this through 4 p.m. today and not answer all the questions. Please feel free to email your questions to me, and with your permission, I will get them to you, and then I can kind of be a conduit in between to hopefully get you the answers to the questions that you have and continue this conversation, which is truly of vital importance. There were 100 people here this morning. It's obviously important to a lot of us, and I think we need to continue the conversation. One request from Rabbi Saroken was if you, Andrea, would lead us in Oseh Shalom to end today. And on behalf of Rabbi Saroken, I would like to thank the three of you for being here, for taking the time out to maybe ease the minds and spark the conversation between a lot of people who really are very passionate and very involved in not just their children's lives, but in the Jewish lives of their children. And I think if we all continue to stay vigilant and supportive, that we can really, we'll be okay.
One of the things that's so amazing about Oseh Shalom is that the words are in our Siddur. They're really ancient. And to imagine that how meaningful they are now to us, imagine that this is something that I'm struck all the time now, you know, like so much of our tradition, just so many small things why is this in our Siddur? It's because as a people, we have struggled to find peace. You know, it's a long hope, So let's sing together. I hope I get a good key. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen.
And that's